Fracking in state parks, and Mayor Coleman floats another passenger rail plan.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News, Joseph Moss, chair of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, and Mark Weaver, Republican strategist.
The idea of fracking in state parks and the ties between regulators and natural gas drillers made headlines this week. Liberal groups uncovered and released a 2012 memo that describes a plan by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources to sell the idea of drilling for natural gas in state parks. The plan identifies potential supporters and potential opponents. It was also sent to top officials in the governor's office. The problem, critics say, is that ODNR regulates oil and natural gas drilling. Laura Bischoff, is this the smoking gun that fracking opponents have been looking for to describe this, quote, cozy relationship between regulators and the drillers?
Well, I don't know how much of a smoking gun it is, but it doesn't really look very good. It's sort of like, remember when the inspectors were supposed to be inspecting the BP oil rig, and actually they were kind of hanging out with them, golfing, partying, or what have you. I think that they should have a much more of a arm's length with the with industry that they regulate, just to keep it cleaner. And also the kind of the narrative in the memo used sort of inflammatory language, like the eco propagandists and the extremists and the rest of it. So, I think it probably had more political overtones than it really needed to have. Now, to say that they shouldn't have been trying to figure out how to advance this policy is ridiculous, I think, but that probably should have originated in the governor's office, not in DNR.
Should have. The memo, if it was just like, because the state law changed, they allowing drilling on public land. The legislature and the governor signed it. Legislature approved it. Governor signed it in 2011. So drilling on state law is allowed. So that debate is over. Would have been better, Mark, if the memo had said, okay, here's how to make it happen. Here are the pros. Here are the cons. Here are the groups we need to involve.
I think Laura makes a good point that in government, nearly every agency works on how they're going to market or communication a particular regulation or policy. That's pretty common. And I think everyone has written some memos in their life that they wish they would have phrased better. And this is a great example. It could have been written in a much more balanced way. Even the two legislators who were named in the memo acknowledge that it's an appropriate function of government for them to, if you will, game out how they're going to implement something so that the public accepts it and so that the facts are out there. Now it's interesting. It seems like the policy will be on hold for a while, and we'll see if it gets picked up sometime in the future, but certainly this could have been written better.
And it's sort of a layered story, because it's not only the issue of the relationship between ODNR and the oil and gas industry, but it's also the issue of the message and when was it really acknowledged by the governor's office. Originally, there was a denial that this had taken place, and then a week later, of course, we are going to be working together with advancing the message of the whole thing. And so it was an inefficient, I think, way of addressing what was obviously going to be released as a consequence of the public records request. That's how it came out.
It is the Department of Natural Resources. Natural gas and oil are natural resources. So I guess the first question is, should ODNR be regulating these drillers? And the next question is, if so, then should they be overseeing state parks where the drilling may happen, I guess?
Well, it's always about a balance, right? We have great natural resources in Ohio, and if we can tap them responsibly, then our economy will grow. We're seeing that, of course, in the eastern part of the state. We're going to talk about fracking some more today, but that's going to be the lifeblood of many eastern Ohio communities. Now, in state parks, we all enjoy state parks. I've spent a lot of time in state parks here in Ohio. There are certainly got to be areas in state parks that are less traveled, where a small footprint can be used to be able to extract national resources in a way that will not affect the public's ability to enjoy the beauty of what Ohio has to offer.
But the governor then has decided, or did decide, not to name the 5 commissioners to the body that it was supposed to advance the regulations.
So basically, he's put the drilling on state parkland on hold.
On hold, essentially, by doing that, because they would be the ones to be able to monitor the situation.
So why did he do that? Is it because of the flap over this memo? Was it because he's looking for leverage in the whole fracking tax thing, or is it just a good idea not to drill on land?
He didn't do the appointment I think in November of 11, so it was quite a while ago that he didn't. The deadline was supposed to be back then, and then there has been this tension back and forth over the severance tax. How big should it be? How little should it be? Oil and gas is pushing back against Kasich. Kasich's pushing back against them. It's in the legislature, so there has been an ongoing battle, and maybe this is kind of tied to that.
Do we need to frack in state parks? There's a lot of land in Ohio.
I talked to somebody at the Oil and Gas Association, and they said that, really drilling in the parks would be nice. There is some drilling going on already, particularly in the Hocking Hills area. But really, there's plenty of other land in Ohio to pursue. So it's not, their point is that Ohio is kind of missing out on a chance to capitalize on high lease rates right now during the boom, and so that it's kind of a poor decision by the Kasich administration to not do it.
And of course, if it's done in public land, then you benefit from that direct money from the lease itself.
Yeah, that was the argument, that the parks, could use the money for upkeep and to improve the rest of the park that, people might use. And you do see the drilling rigs in some of the state parks down in the Hocking Hills. They're tucked in off the trail sometimes, but they are there. So we'll see. Another source of jobs in eastern Ohio is causing controversy. Last year, Ormet Corporation closed its aluminum factory in Hannibal along the Ohio River. 700 workers lost their jobs. The company blames the shutdown on the Ohio Public Utilities Commission, which refused to cut the plant's electric bill. Laid-off workers blame Governor Kasich for not doing enough to save the factory. Now, as the 2014 campaign ramps up, Democrats are jumping on the blame Kasich for Ormet bandwagon. Mark Weaver, does the governor regret at least a little that he didn't do more to try to prevent this plant from shutting down?
Well, most analysts know that the reason why this plant had to shut down, it has much more to do with the world aluminum market than it does any decision that could be made in Ohio. I know that the congressman there, Bill Johnson, has worked closely with Governor Kasich to try to be responsive to the needs of 700 newly displaced workers. And I know that there is at least one option where Ormet could go to the PUCO and ask for permission to buy electricity from the free market, which might bring their costs down and might allow them to reemploy other people. So there apparently are still other options. But it's truly a sad thing for this county, which was already one of the highest unemployment counties in Ohio, and then to lose 700 jobs on top of that has been a great tragedy. But I do know the congressman there and Governor Kasich have spent a lot of time and their focus trying to resolve this issue.
I can't really disagree with Mark too much. I think the only question is there something more that the state can do? Maybe sort of the last-ditch effort to bring down the processing costs. The electricity costs for this industry are just tremendous. But you are absolutely right in that the world market for aluminum is down. I don't know about depressed, but it's certainly down, and it doesn't. And the studies seem to indicate that it cannot sustain this particular plant. What would happen if you get dirt cheap electricity costs? Who knows?
Well, the governor's taken a lot of heat because he put the heat on Ted Strickland 4 years ago when DHL and NCR all left. You could argue they left Ohio because of market forces, but still it was under Strickland's watch. He took the hit. And this is sort of payback.
Well, let's remember, first of all, DHL was, 7,000 or 8,000 jobs compared to 700 here, so a much bigger impact in that community than this was, although they're both tragic. And secondly, if there's one thing you have to say about Governor Kasich, he has spent nearly his entire legislative agenda trying to bring more jobs to Ohio, trying to make this a place where companies want to locate. And so nobody can say that he has not worked hard at that particular objective.
Laura, is it ironic that it's on the other side, it's the Democrat, Ed Fitzgerald, saying that, he wants to give the governor more power over the PUCO and, an independent commission to try to work this deal?
Of course, the governor appoints the members of the PUCO and does have some authority over them in that regard. But they serve out, I think, 5-year terms, so they're supposed to be an autonomous board. I don't know that giving the governor more power over the PUCO is necessarily a good idea. But it does, you're right, it does sound a lot like the NCR rhetoric that we heard on the campaign trail 4 years ago when John Kasich put it all at Ted Strickland's feet, saying you didn't remember the chairman, the CEO's name, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And it's easy to kind of throw this up in front of the voters in a quick hit line on a campaign stump speech or in an ad. But there's a lot of nuances of why these companies make these decisions, and it's not always the governor's fault. Certainly, maybe more things could have been done in all of these cases, but we're going to hear more about Ormet. The Democrats will make sure of that.
I'm sure there are going to be some Bain-style ads featuring Ormet workers and on the Democrat side.
And that's the way that these campaigns are run. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent. I think it's good for the people to know what the real facts are. But look, with respect to jobs, with respect to industry, there are a lot of factors other than politics and other than state government that control.
I think that's well put.
Does the location of this plant weigh in? This is in Southeast Ohio, which is, solid Republican area, where if it was in Northeast Ohio or in the Dayton area or here in Central Ohio, that it might be a little different story.
Well, Southeast Ohio has traditionally been a conservative area, not necessarily a Republican area, but certainly Republican office holders have done well down there over the last several years. This is an economically depressed area, and as a result, we talked about fracking earlier, the ability to allow these landowners to be able to sell their rights to the natural gas and sometimes oil into their property could do for southeastern Ohio what it has done for northern North Dakota, where we now have the lowest unemployment rate in America, and people can arrive there and get jobs at $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 as soon as they arrive.
All right, let's get to our next topic. We still have 9 months to go, but there is a new poll in the governor's race, and the good news for Governor Kasich is his approval rating is high. The good news for Ed Fitzgerald is he's still in the race. So to get an idea of where this state lies, we look at where we were exactly 4 years ago when Kasich was the challenger. First, in the overall race, the incumbent John Kasich leads the challenger Ed Fitzgerald by 7 percentage points. 4 years ago, when he was the challenger, John Kasich trailed Ted Strickland by 5 points. So not a whole lot of difference there with 9 months to go. Now let's look at the approval ratings in February of the 2 years. Kasich stands at 51%. That's above the all-important 50% mark. Ted Strickland in 2010, a little bit below 50% at 48%, so still kind of similar there. Now, name recognition is always the first challenge for the challenger. Fitzgerald right now is still unknown by 70% of Ohioans. 4 years ago, John Kasich was unknown by 62%, so he was doing a little bit better, but still not great as far as the known-unknown category. And the number that worries Democrats now and worried Democrats then is the satisfaction number. 56% of Ohioans say they are now satisfied with how things are going. In 2010, less than a third of Ohioans were satisfied with where things stood. And Mark Weaver, I assume that's the number that the Republicans are looking at, saying that's what we're going to sell to voters over the next 9 months.
Well, it is. It's a key barometer of whether people want to change in their government. If you ask that same question in America, you get a much different result for how Ohioans feel about the way things are going at the federal level. People aren't thrilled in Ohio about how things are going, but they know it's getting better. So what we have is we have a race that's going to tighten, meaning John Kasich's not going to win this race by 20 points. This will be probably a single-digit victory on his behalf, 7, 8, 9 points. It won't be big, but what I'm hearing from several different folks, both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, and how angry and disappointed some Democratic leaders are at the bad rollout of the Fitzgerald effort, from the lieutenant governor problem to other problems he's had, and now in Cleveland, even in his own backyard, he's having to fight off backfires.
But still, he's only down by 6 points.
Basically, he's down by 5 points.
5 points is what I'm reading.
5 points. So
that's Ohio. It's a competitive state. Our statewide office holders tend not to win by large numbers.
You know, I'd like to think of these gubernatorial races as two types. One of them is issues-based, and the other would be personality-based. A big personality, John Glenn, for example, or in the national arena, Bill Clinton, is one type of race. But then when you have an issues-based race, which this could become, and it's likely to become, I think you've got some issues I'm going to focus on a little bit later in my closing comments, but certainly the women's right to choose, certainly this environmental issue on the fracking, and so on, could become the driving force. And let's not forget, there's another thing that I think we have forgotten. 4 years ago, we had a crisis in Cuyahoga County that kept 55,000 voters at home. We may not have that this time. The unknown, 70%, is that too high of an unknown percentage? You know, we are in 2014 now. We're not a year out. We're less than a year out.
What I think is interesting about that is that John Kasich was at 62% unknown, and he had served in Congress for 18 years. I think Ed Fitzgerald is a little bit newer on the big stage, and I also think that this he's got to start defining himself before the Kasich side defines him, and I think that that number is not going to go down until we see some TV ads and some debates and some other stuff where people actually tune in.
Well, that's a key point because, remember, you get known in Ohio by buying television ads. There's other ways, of course, but that's the biggest voice in a campaign. And if you don't have the money to run those ads, you'll never get well known enough. And in the next few months, people who have to decide which side to donate on, whether it's going to be Kasich or Fitzgerald, remember, Fitzgerald has a primary. As an African-American candidate,
maybe a good thing.
It could be, but
there's
also
a name on the ballot. I wouldn't say he has a primary.
It highlights his weakness with the most loyal constituency to the Democratic Party, which is African-American votes. And so he's going to win, of course, but he has to get through that. And so the big money donors are still not sure whether or not Fitzgerald can get out of the gate strongly.
But I think that when a poll at this point showing him 5 points out makes it look like he does have a shot, and so it's much more likely that the funding is going to come in, and he will get some money to get his message out. Now, if the poll starts going the other direction, if there's more gaffes in how he continues his campaign, and it looks shaky, well, then that also scares off the fundraisers. So it's really kind of a critical time, I think, for the Fitzgerald campaign to really kind of coalesce.
That's right.
And
he has to keep it close for the national money.
It is a critical time, and that's true. It's the national money that makes the difference because the Democratic Governors Association has several races they have to pay attention to. How much do they put in Ohio?
Okay. Governor Kasich gives his State of the State address next week for the third straight year. Much to the delight of lawmakers, their staffs, and the media, the governor takes his speech on the road. Medina hosts the annual speech this year. Laura Bischoff, it's a re-election year. Do we expect any bold initiatives in this speech?
Well, usually a governor going into a re-election will sort of review the things that he's done and the projects he's got underway and the policies, and I think we'll hear some of that. That's what we heard from Ted Strickland 4 years ago. It was a lot of a nod to the tough economy, but then a lot about we believe in Ohio, sort of a cheerleading rah-rah kind of message. Now, Kasich's not your typical politician, though, so maybe I think he will kind of roll out some stuff that he wants to put into what he calls his mid-biennial review package, a whole bunch of policy changes having to do with taxes, job training, higher education, K-12. So I think it'll be a little bit meatier, and also I think that what I'm interested to see also is how he delivers it, the mechanics of it. His first two speeches were very unscripted. I think he had about one index card worth of notes. Yeah. They ran long. They were kind of rambling. He caught a lot of criticism for that. I thought his Lima one was his best one so far because he used more complete notes and he stayed more on track and was much more focused. And I think going into his re-election and also possibly setting the table for 2016 if he wants to continue to be considered a presidential contender, he needs to have a very focused, balanced, and dynamite speech.
So, Mark, if he has a teleprompter, does that mean he's running for president in 2016?
I don't think he's going to have a teleprompter. I do agree with Laura that the Lima speech was the best of the State of the States, and I think it's going to be a lot more like that. You're going to see a governor this year who is on message, who's disciplined, and who is learning how to take his many ideas and explain them in a way that can be said short and sweet.
And to put it another way, and I agree with both Mark and Laura, I think that he has been moving towards the middle over the past year. I think it will stay there, but he will make that message a little more clear.
He's been pushing, dropping hints of vocational education, trying to help students who necessarily aren't going to college or want a job that's a good job that's not involving a college education. That might be something.
That's a national dialogue that's going on.
And it was recently reported that the VOTEC education had been only for 9 through 12 graders, and the state quietly canceled out that rule back in September, and now they're moving it down to as early as 7th grade. John Kasich has not made any kind of secret the fact that he thinks that kids should be starting to think about jobs and careers like from kindergarten on.
It's in Medina. This year it's kind of like, so what? It's out of town, but should it be out of town every year Does it lose? You watch C-SPAN and you see all these state of the state addresses, and they're in the the regal state houses around the country, and ours is in an auditorium in Medina, Ohio. Nice to bring it on the road, but it loses some stature. No?
Let the governor pick where he wants to have the state of the state. Most Ohioans don't watch the state of the state. It's not televised on major networks in its entirety. You can find it online. You can find it on the Ohio Channel. But what's the big deal? Have it where you're going to have it. In this case, it's Medina, so maybe it's a lovely parting gift to Speaker Bill Batchelor.
It's his hometown.
And actually, it's the governor doesn't get to decide where to have it. The legislature decides it. The legislature, it's a legislative event.
So let me ask this question. If it was a Democratic governor and he wanted to have his speech in Youngstown, would the Republican legislature let him or her?
I think they'd let him have it at Cedar Point, where that's where amusement happens. Right?
So, yeah.
Kings Island.
Kings Island, Southwest Ohio. Kings
They
Island.
have to do it in the General Assembly.
It'd be interesting what the next governor does if the next governor takes it on the road.
I like the idea.
All right. Mayor Mike Coleman has long dreamed of passenger rail service in Columbus. First there was the line from Worthington, then the downtown streetcar idea, the 3C Rail project, a proposal linking Columbus to Cleveland and Cincinnati. In his State of the City address this week, Coleman proposed another idea, passenger rail linking downtown with Port Columbus. Joe Moss, the train to the plains. Is that going to work?
It surprised me a little bit to hear that. I didn't expect to hear it in that particular message. I love the idea. I love the idea not because I like rail necessarily. I'm not sure I was all that excited about the trolley thing between Ohio State and the Short North. But you have to admit, going into and out of Port Columbus is clunky. And I know that when I travel to San Francisco, Philadelphia, Chicago, the first thing I look for is there a way for me to get to, and all three of those cities certainly have rail service. And one of the details that I don't remember hearing in the speech, but I think I read in the Dispatch story, is that apparently there is a rail line existing that is close to the airport and close to or comes to downtown. So maybe that would be an opening there.
COTA had a bus to the airport, didn't do well. They shut it down after a few years. Well, 37 passengers a day,
says
apparently.
Something. We also should look to Cincinnati. Our neighbors in the southwestern part of the state have an ongoing battle about what they call the streetcar. I know that's a little different, but what it does is it pits city interests versus county interests. So when you poll, for example, in Hamilton County, people in the city love the idea because it serves their needs. People in the outer counties don't. And so if you live downtown and go to the airport a lot, perhaps you'd like to have that done. But if there's not a market to do it, the question becomes, who pays?
Laura, is this just, I mean, in most cities where they have light rail, passenger rail, streetcars, there's opposition at the start. But once it gets in, people tend to warm up to it and like it and sometimes even expand it. Is this just the mayor's idea to get a toehold? We didn't work in Worthington, it didn't work at OSU. Let's try the airport. Maybe this is our way in.
Perhaps, but I think that you have to justify the cost. And if there's only 37 passengers on the bus, is it going to become more wildly popular? And once it comes in, it comes into downtown. And then what? So most of the residents, it really would serve, I guess, conventioneers, people who were coming to be tourists.
I think it would. And what I was kind of dying to add is the fact that we have the OSU market, and that is not being served by the current system. I think that if we did have a rail to the downtown, and then there are plenty of buses going up and down High Street, that would give you that particular market. I think the demographics could support it.
The infrastructure costs are so high and the ongoing operation costs are so high. I've not run the numbers, but I'd be willing to bet it'd be cheaper to have helicopter service.
And cooler.
It would be cooler, no doubt.
Cool. Part of it is, I think Charlotte has a train that runs between the airport and downtown, and he's trying to get to convention. This was the selling point.
I got to say, when I travel to a place and they have light rail from the airport to a downtown area, I use it all the time. It's great.
Yeah, it goes to the. I frankly think the mayor is kind of out of ideas. I mean, he's been in office. This is his 15th State of the City. How many bold ideas could you have? You had downtown housing. You had bridges downtown, the Scioto Mile, Skybus. Remember Skybus?
You're going to get parking tickets on your
still
car
working
every day
on all
now.
of those.
I mean,
that's terrible, Mike.
I don't think it's not
Get
a bad
behind
thing.
The mayor.
He's used it all.
Come on, it's Mayor Coleman. It's Mayor for Life Coleman.
He didn't mention the zoo project, if you noticed, or snow plowing. But anyway, it's time for our off-the-record comments, and we will start with Mark Weaver.
Every 2 years we have national elections. In Ohio we have one statewide. And the key voting demographic that moves is the independent voter. In 2006 they went big for Democrats. In 2008 big for Democrats. 10 and 12 much more for Republicans. Where are they going this year? Early polls say Republicans. Keep your eye on that.
Joe.
A little more flesh to an earlier comment. I have a prediction that in the coming month the Ed Fitzgerald campaign will settle on an issues-based message, citing the need to provide a potential veto to more maybe extreme things coming out of the General Assembly, particularly in the areas of women's health, including right to choose, ballot access, that was your African-American vote, and the environment, which means fracking in the state of Ohio.
You might be right, because he did talk about that today at a press conference about he urged the governor to veto some of those voting bills. I'm going to talk a little bit. Quinnipiac University is coming out with another poll on Monday morning, and they're hitting a lot of social hot buttons: death penalty, gay marriage, abortion, legal pot. I'm interested to see what the gay marriage numbers show, because there's a lot of unsettled territory. There's a kind of a battle going on about whether or not they should go to the ballot this year or in 2016, and maybe the poll will answer some of that.
John Kasich this week suggested that career planning should begin as early as first grade. It's never too early to start thinking about your career. If that happens, I predict a glut of firefighters in 20 years.
Well, football stars.
Could be. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Twitter, Facebook, our website, WOSU.org. For our crew and for our panel here at WOSU at COSI, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.